All right, so the demo is on sweeps. And what you have in front of you here on your sheet is just some basic rundown of the importance of properties of a sweep. So a sweep is simply, it's a new feature, right? So so far we've learned extrude, revolve, pattern. Sweep is a new one. You can think of it as an extrude along a path is one way to think about it. But sweeps are always made from typically two sketches, a profile. So in this case, it's this kind of like half circle with a shorter arc on top that follows a path, which in this case is just a simple arc. It's worth mentioning, and it's not on the sheet, that paths don't have to be sketches, actually, or profiles for that matter, I don't think. You could select like a face to sweep, but more often than not, the profile is a sketch. The path can be edges sometimes, and that's useful to know because a sweep doesn't only have to happen in one direction. A sweep could like curve to the right and then curve up and away from you using selecting continuous edges or making like, combined curves or 3D sketches, what have you. If someone's interested in that, we can definitely get into it. So a couple like best practice, your profile, and I'll show this in SOLIDWORKS in a minute, but the profile, it's best if it's perpendicular to the path. Or another way to state that would be that the plane that the profile is sketched on is perpendicular to the path. Okay, they have like a 90-degree relationship. And let's just adjust these one at a time and jump in here. So for example, I'll just hide this sweep for a minute. If on the front plane, I'll just copy this square that I already have. And now on the right plane, I'll sketch a path for this to follow. Let's just imagine that it does something like this. So here in this case, this is not perpendicular because this, even though this is an arc, it's a tangency. I accidentally double clicked. This relationship is not 90 degrees. Does this make sense to everybody? And I'll just show you what happens when it'll work, it should work, when you try and sweep this. So we're getting into this command now, but this will be part of the demo later. So swap boss base, here it's asking for my profile and my path. So in this case, the profile is this square. Here's the path. Let's see if I can exaggerate this. What it does is it starts this sweep. You can see it's like this at this weird angle, and has it's like narrow. It doesn't sweep the shape you would expect, right? If you were expecting your handle to be, I think this is an inch long, because it goes at an angle, this is less than an inch tall. So it just basically sweeps a skewed perspective of your object. Whereas if we then edit this and bend this out to make it 90, you can see how the sweep grows in thickness as it gets more perpendicular. That's more true to the shape that you might want to extrude along that, if that makes sense. So main takeaway, best practice, have this path being perpendicular to the profile. Because again, if it's not, the resulting like cross section will not be true to the shape you have sketched. Okay. Are there any questions on that? So moving on, the path should intersect the profile plane. This hopefully should be logical, but possibly it's not. SOLIDWORKS has gotten better. Let me see if I break this relationship, if it will still sweep. Sometimes it does. But yeah, so here's an error. I should have left that up. Cannot get a point on path to start with. So that's because there is, if I make these sketches visible to us again, there is a gap here. So when your profile looks to start along its path, it's going to look for a point to start with. So I believe it's okay if this breaks the plane. But you can see if it breaks the plane like this, it doesn't know which way to go. In this case, it's going to the left, not to the right. Whereas if this is directly on the plane, you can see it snaps and goes the right way. So just something to be aware of. I believe they've updated this since that you can change direction by clicking these toggles. which way you want it to go. So it's very important that the path go through the shape. Any questions on that point? Okay, next up, location of the profile to the path affects the outcome. So roughly centered works best. Again, based on your expectations. So looking again at this example in CAD. So here we're just going to send this way. If I play with this sketch, for the most part, here I'm going to set this to be coincident to the front plane. So let's say you want your handle to turn like a certain arc. You'll notice that if it's attached to the top, this turn gets really tight. If it's attached to the bottom, it gets really big. So having the path be about the center, again, is typically going to result in what you might expect or what you might be looking for in a sweep. So that's my advice, and that's why it's there. Again, just being aware that where this is located, it prevents, what the sweep looks like. And finally, a reason that sweeps sometimes fail, or the most common reason, is profiles can't turn tight corners. And there's kind of a rule here. So and the rule is stated after this. So assuming a centered intersection, the path arc radius must be larger than half the profile height. That might sound confusing, but when I show you in SOLIDWORKS, it should be intuitive. Let me get out of here and just suppress this, and we'll look at this one. So again, this box is 1 inch by 1 inch tall. Right now this is a 1 inch radius, that's fine. If I turn this to half an inch radius, this is what the sweep looks like, right? Because the box is passing through the center and turning, it basically ends up being a revolve about this line. Does this intuitively make sense to everybody, what's going on here? So now, if I change this to 0.49, it's going to fail because we're asking this box to turn a tight corner where it's going to like overlap and crash through itself here. The 0.5 is the smallest turn it can make, and so now it fails. So this is really important to know because if you're trying to sweep a handle and something's wrong, chances are it's going through something too tight or it's making a turn it can't make. And that's the most common reason why sweeps fail. So again, if your handle height is 1 inch tall, then the tightest curve it can make is a ½ inch, assuming that the path is right in the middle. Make sense? Okay. I know that's kind of a dry opening, but this is really like what's important about sweeps. Just like any other feature, there is a positive and negative, so you can also use the sweep as a cut tool. Okay, launching right into the demo. It asks you to start by making some master sketches. So and again, this is where it's open based on what direction you want to pick. To change this up, you're welcome to do that. So it asks you to start by making a line here that's 1 3/4 inches tall, 1.75 inches tall. A line perpendicular to that, that's 1 inch wide. And then a line above that, that's 1/4 inch. And then if you have kind of this setup, you can then create arcs. So with this first arc at the bottom, this center is coincident to here. Again, if you're following this literally. And then this next arc, you're selecting this and this line and making that coincident. There's different ways to approach this. That's just one way. All right. Now that you have that sketch, the next thing it asks you to do is to create the arc, and this is going to be the path that your handle is going to follow. And there are some important things here. So again, part of this class is like product detailing and spacing. In general, I'm just going to throw this in here to show you. There were some questions about driven dimensions or driving dimensions. If I put this in here, it's going to give me that error because it's all of these stacked dimensions are fighting. In this case, it's being told to be 1.75 inches tall, and this is a half circle that's 1 inch, so this is fixed at a ½ inch here. So this is already fully defined. By me putting this in here, it's over defining it. Basically, these two dimensions are fighting each other. In this case, I'm going to say make this dimension driven, so it just tells you. So again, for your design toolkit, rule of thumb, if you're ever making a handle, 1.25 inch space from the back of the handle to where it's mounted is probably the bare minimum. Anything smaller than that, kind of sketchy, and typically more space than that, especially if it's like a hot door handle, so just for your reference. This is also just a general guide for handles on appliances. Inch wide is typical. That's on the small side. A lot of the grills I've worked on, the handles are like 1.25 inches is average there, and sometimes 1.5 inches. So just side note there on general best practice for handles. Same here, this dimension of 4 inches is intentional. Most handles are about 4 inches wide in the grip area. So as you design your own handles, try and get those dimensions to be accurate. Okay, so once you have these sketches set up, it asks you then to go ahead and make the sweep. So you look for it at the top, it's right here, Swept Boss Base. Click on that, and immediately, again, the property dialog comes up. I already showed it briefly. But again, these two icons, one is a circle, it's saying, hey, what do you want to, what's the profile? And then this one's asking you, what's the path? So here you can simply, oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. These are our master sketches, and I want you all to still maintain that best practice. So you want to create a new sketch on the front plane, select sketch 1, and convert entities on that. Whoops, wrong, I picked the wrong sketch, my bad. Or no, sorry, I'm on the wrong plane. You want to pick, sorry, in this case, the right plane for this one. Create a new sketch by pressing Alt-S or going here. Select this first sketch and then C as in convert entities, or click on this. Now we want to copy this over, same thing. And I realize that this may feel tedious on so simple a file, but it is best practice. And you only need to do it for the beginning steps. I noticed some of you, I think, did it for like every sketch you created. That's not necessary. It's mainly for the masters, which in this case is like these two sketches. All right. So now is when you want to go to features, Swept Boss Base, and again, it's asking for profile and path. In this case, if you click on this, it'll probably select the first sketch. So it's better to make this tree drop down. Hover over, you can see it when you hover over this, it turns orange. So select the profile and select the path. And click check. Now, there is one thing I omitted here. Let's see. I believe it's step 4 in the demo. But what we eventually do, we have the origin on the top plane here, and we're going to use this to cut the handle. You'll notice that my handle stops just short of that. Okay, so I'll just continue and then go back and show you what I missed. So the next thing asks you to use a cut with surface command. This is a new command. You could totally do this with just an extrude cut, but in this case, you go to surfaces, cut with surface, and in this case, we're using this top plane. And this is why we set up our sketch the way we did. And what this does is anything to either side of the top plane will be cut. In this case, you can see the arrows pointing down, so anything below the top plane will be cut. And this is the mistake that I made. You can see that the handle is stuck up a little bit here. This is, again, why it's good to do master sketches, and this is why I have this demo set up this way. It's good to know that you can, it's perfectly acceptable. The master sketch tells you where it stops, but if you need to make the cut go further, you can totally drag this down. It makes it more adjustable. You still have the initial sketch controlled, but now you can kind of extend this by just dragging on that point. Again, I believe it's step 4 that I missed, but what it asks you to do is to click on this point and just drag it. If it doesn't want to move it first, I believe dragging it back and down will move that. By extending this now, it fully cuts it because it makes the sweep go further. So again, just be aware that you can always kind of make those adjustments on the fly to your sketches that you're building from that you may not want to make to your master sketch. Once you have that cut, the next thing it asks you to do is to mirror the handle. So again, a part of this project and part of this approach is all about efficiency. How can you build your models quickly? Whenever you're working on a handle, unless it's asymmetric, I assume you're going to work on it in halves. If it is symmetrical and you don't work on it in halves, that's an opportunity to lose points in project 2. So the next thing you're going to do here is go back to the features tab and look for the mirror component. Again, not to be confused with the mirror component in Sketches. This says mirror entities. This says mirror, so it's the feature. You want to click on this. So here, property dialog, first it asks you which face plane do you want to mirror about. In this case, we want to mirror. You could simply click on this face, or you could click on the right plane. And now here it defaults to features, and this is what we did for bottles. But again, it's good to know that this is not a robust part of this feature. It is more robust to mirror bodies whenever possible. So in this case, you're simply it's gonna prompt you for this. Don't click on anything. Simply like expand the bodies to mirror here. And now this box should be blue, and you simply just click on your handle. And you should see it ghost out in yellow. Some of the more settings down here, typically you do want to merge the solids because it's probably one complete handle in this case. You don't have to do this, but sometimes if you're trying to apply material and color, if it's a big file, this can cause problems sometimes. So sometimes I'll just uncheck that. When you're done, you hit the green check, and there you have it. You have your handle mirrored. The last step is simply to just fillet this edge. Go ahead and select the fillet feature. Select both these edges. I think it says to point to, but again, it's up to you. You can kind of play with the settings. And there you have it. That's a swept handle. And I assume this is the most basic handle you could have. I do want to talk more about details later, but for now, this is just an intro to sweeps. So I want to invite you all to basically just follow those steps and have a handle like this. Again, you are welcome to change the profile sketch if you want to try and match a different aesthetic or something.